Welcome to another episode of the CEO Peak. I am Dave Ash, the CEO of Varlinks that sponsors this show. We transform the invisible human tendencies that inhibit business performance in high complexity. Our purpose is to evolve leadership effectiveness so that together we create a ripple effect of unity in the world. The CEO Peak Show is devoted to addressing the leadership team challenges that get in the way of achieving business results. We invite insightful and inspirational CEOs who are thought leaders in advancing their team effectiveness. Such a leader is our guest today, Manish Hirapara, the CEO of PeakActivity, a digital strategy and technical implementation company partnering with businesses to accelerate growth through e-commerce, digital marketing, and technology solutions. Manish founded PeakActivity in 2015, and under his leadership, the company grew to more than 200 employees. Prior to founding and leading PeakActivity, Manish was a senior director of e-commerce at Office Depot, overseeing an e-commerce platform that transacted over $7 billion in revenue worldwide. He's also the founder of Peak Cares, the philanthropic arm of PeakActivity. Hello, Manish, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Dave. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I'm glad to have you here. You know, I love the story, how you founded the company and what happened and what triggered your focus on leadership and leadership team development when the last time we met before the interview. And I'll ask you to share it again, what you learned and what actually helped you to shift and focus on leadership as one of your domains of development.
Yeah, I mean, we founded the company in a way that many companies get founded, right? It was out of necessity, out of need. We saw an opportunity in the market, and we started, with myself out there consulting, providing expertise of the things I had learned in my prior life. I started my career as a computer engineer, software developer, and rose through the ranks and became a leader of engineering talent. And over time, I also became a leader of business talent. And I saw the opportunity that many companies are going on this digital journey and they need a strong partner with expertise along the way. And so we started with one employee, and then we went to two, and then we went to 4 and 8, and we saw the path forward, which was this was a coveted need. And over time, we realized when you have 8 employees, 16 employees, 24 employees, you now need to really think about leadership. You need to think about career development. And over the years, learning, having come from a big company, learning the importance of a team, learning the importance of culture, I saw the need to apply that with PeakActivity. And so I'm excited to discuss leadership and all the things that go along with it and the complexities and challenges that it brings to us, but also how successful it can make us as well if we do it well. So glad to be here to discussing it. It's one of my favorite subjects to discuss.
Was it a specific event that triggered this shift in the company?
Yeah, we grew like all other companies grow, or many other companies grow. We grew very organically, and about 2 years ago, I founded the company with a co-founder, and it was time to separate. It was time to go our separate ways, and he's still a great guy. We're still friends and get along well, but we saw a difference in the paths we were going on. He has been really, really successful with small groups and small companies and being a great entrepreneur. And when you're a great entrepreneur, you're getting started and you're able to turn lemons into lemonade. Where we were was at the inflection point. I believe we had about 40 or 50 employees at the time, and we were on a path to get to where we are today, which is probably quadruple that. And the need to have a real solid leadership team, and the need to professionalize the company, the need to move beyond bootstrapping entrepreneurs that are scrappy and able to turn the company into something without necessarily diluting the culture, but something that we can now put into repeatability mode. So it wasn't always Manish as the CEO in every conversation, but really leaders, true leaders that could build out teams, that could build out business practices on their own. And so through this process of kind of discovering ourselves and discovering where we wanted to go, and we wanted to go on different paths. And so it really triggered that moment to say, look, we went through this sort of separation together. And for me now, as a sole leader, I had to have people I could trust. I had to have a strong team that we could commit to common goals. We could share common core values. And it was that moment in time where I said, you know what, I really need to apply everything I've learned thus far in my career in terms of leadership and continue to learn, right? Continue to seek out podcasts, continue to seek out books, continue to seek out great pieces of information, and never stop that sort of lifelong adventure of learning about this so that we can try new things out as well.
Yeah. And I remember that you mentioned that at that point of time after you departed, you felt like a sense of lonely at the top, which is a common say among CEOs, and which defaulted you to the team. Bizarrely, I never felt like that when I was a CEO of larger corporations because, I always defaulted to the team. So what was that shift? That was the sense that drove you actually to count more on your leadership team, or something else drove that?
No, definitely when you think about major decisions, you never want to make them in a vacuum. You never want to make them without different points of view, different points of insight. And it is definitely lonely at the top. You don't always have a way of making decisions that's unified, that you just run through it in your head and out comes a great decision. And more importantly, when you make strategic decisions, you have to be able to check and act upon them and upon where are we? Do we make the right decision? Do we need to take a different path? So for me, that moment of, okay, first of all, when you're going through a major structural change to the company, you need to have people you can discuss that with. So that was that moment that said, I need this network, not just of people within my company, but also outside of my company, not just leaders that work for me, but others who have gone on the journey as well that we can relate to, because there are people who've done it well, there's people who've not done it well. And I definitely want to learn from both. And so for me to be able to say, all right, we're going to be doing this and have multiple conversations so we can triangulate that whether or not we're going down the right path. That was that moment that said, you know what, I really need to take some time. I need to take a step back. And I think a lot of people use the phrase of working on the business, not in the business, right? That was my moment that said, you know what, I need to work on the business. I need to be a leader for the families that depend on this company, and also make sure that we can grow and scale the way we want to, right? If we're going to make this shift as a company and grow into a mid-sized company from where we were as a small company, that takes a new level of learning and understanding. And so I think that was that's sort of the cradle of where we said, you know what, we really need to apply techniques, tried and true techniques that have been patterned and done before to this organization.
Yeah. I love this shift from working in the business, working on the business, and actually correlated to also to a different shift, working in the leadership team and working on the leadership team. Can you elaborate? Are you also distinguishing between the two? Because working in the leadership team is, following the agenda of strategic agenda on the meetings, but working on a team is how to develop the leadership team to be really effective.
Yeah, we've invested a good amount of energy and time into making sure that we can collaborate, making sure that we can communicate. And so it's one thing to be working in the leadership team where we're following and setting our objectives and key results, and we're measuring them, and we're working through the daily rhythms of the business. But working on the team, looking at executive retreats, looking at personality profiles, looking at strategic plans, working on business model canvases, and working together, right? Because it's not where you can do this one-on-one with the leader, but they all need to come together. Because if I have my marketing team that doesn't understand where my technology team is going, their ships passing in the night. They're two separate organizations if you create it that way. At the end of the day, almost all companies have one P&L and one bank account. You might have sub P&Ls, but over time, you have to create that mindset that Everyone contributes to a common goal. And if you don't work on the leadership team, especially as a CEO of a fast growing company, you start getting into the cracks in the foundation, which can lead to major challenges. And that's something I recognized. I'd love to say I have it solved, but I don't. There's a lot more work to be done, and it's a continuing journey. But taking the time to work on how do we work together? How are we in terms of communicating with each other? How are we in terms of understanding of each other's perspectives? Those are all things that really take decent amount of effort and something that I believe strongly that leaders have to apply.
Yeah. So you mentioned those challenges in front of the team. So and I'm fascinated actually with all these type of challenges that hinder business performance, usually unseen. It might be the elephant in the room, and sometimes, or the inability to be really courageous, authentic with each other. What type of challenges you see in leadership team to be really highly effective? Because look, studies show that most leadership teams aren't that effective, and something gets in the way, and it's very difficult to identify those things that get in the way. What in your opinion, are the things that get in the way of becoming a very effective leadership team?
The biggest thing that I find is making sure that we have really three things. The first is a solid strategy, working through together. What is our vision? What is our mission? What are our objectives? What are our goals? Being able to connect at the overall level, because if you're all working in different directions, no matter what, the leadership team is not going to be effective. If somebody's over here with a revenue goal and somebody over here is with a margin or profitability goal, they're going to be off to different paths of it. The second thing I found is really looking at the processes and sort of the repeatability of it. How do you have these rhythms that a team can work together? How do we establish a forum for whether it's a daily stand up or a weekly 1 hour meeting for us to communicate and identify the challenges that we're having? And to your point of being able to be authentic and looking introspectively, it might be challenges that I have within my team and that I need to bring to the table that somebody else may be able to help solve. So creating that sort of safe space to say, look, we're not judging, we're trying to get better. We're trying to have continuous improvement. We're trying to really make that big difference. Once you've kind of established the strategy and you've established the process, the third is really what I would call the ability to stick to it. And I will tell you personally, this is one of the things that me being a highly innovation oriented risk taker, if you will, and being okay with shades of gray, by creating that discipline and structure and being able to stick to it, to say, we're following this process, we're going down this point of strategy. Not to say that it's set in stone. If we see a new market opportunity, we can have the discussion and change where we go. But having that rhythm, having that open ability to communicate, having the ability to collaborate, by having that sort of trust that comes into effect by saying, you know what, every Thursday I'm going to be able to go into our 2:00 leadership meeting, and I'm going to be able to bring forward the challenges that I have, and it's going to be a safe space. And I know I can count on every Thursday that we're going to have this session. And for us, establishing that, especially as a mid-sized company, when you're a small company, you can get away with, let me just send a Slack message, or let me just have a one-to-one conversation. But the group needs to hear things together and go on the journey together as well.
Yeah. So let me see if I got it right. You mentioned like three things. First of all, there's the alignment around the purpose and the vision, the processes that you have with the team, and the ability to stick to those processes and creating this safe space for everybody to feel unjudgmental and not being judged by others, right?
Right. The consistency that flows from it, right? I'm a big believer. You have to say something 7 or 8 times for something to sink in. So if you have that consistency, it's going to sink in, versus if you just do it once, you communicate your vision once and then you expect everyone to hear it and resonate to it. It doesn't quite work.
Yeah, this consistency that come from a repetition.
Correct.
Right. So I wonder, leadership teams and management teams are so busy. You have always so many things on the to-do list that never end. And very few teams actually allocate the time to work on the team. It's like the same metaphor as working in the business. You can easily find yourself not working in the business and not working on the business, right? It's like the business as usual, where there's the strategy and the future and so on. And the same, you can find yourself actually working in the team rather than take the pause to reflect and be, you mentioned that you use the word introspect, actually, how we are working together as a team. How does it come into effect in your leadership team in the way that you lead them?
You know what? I believe that there's cycles, and there's a cycle that I went through 2 years ago when I was going through a transition in the at the top level, and I was forced to work on the leadership of the team. I was forced to work on the business, and I went and I hired a great leadership team, and they're working on the business today, and they're working in the business today, and they went through and they built their respective areas, and now they're facing some of the same constraints I did 2 years ago, where they're so entrenched in the day to day, they're so involved with so many things that are going on, and they struggle with the time to work on their leadership teams. They struggle with the time to work on themselves and take the time off that they need. And one of the things that we're seeing is that cycle is repeating now, right? It's repeating one level down in the company. And I'm sure if we have this podcast 2 years from now, Dave, it's going to be two levels down, right? It'll be, oh, well, our top level leaders, they established their direct reports and they got things cascaded down, and they created a great set of organizations themselves. But now their direct reports are struggling with a burgeoning team and too much responsibility. So the job, that I see as great leaders is for us to help steer through these cycles. The cycles will always happen. The challenge of growing and constraints and resources and challenge between personalities, that's always going to be there, no matter what company you go to, no matter what. It's human behavior. But for us to be able to process those and guide and say, look, I've been there. I was there 2 years ago. I had the need and I was forced to make sure I hired a great leadership team and empower you guys and put you to the market and say, look, this is my leadership team. They're here to serve you just as well as I could. It's now your job to do the same with your direct reports and coaching them through that and working through how to do that. I wish there was a secret sauce to that, Dave, but it's understanding, it's collaboration, it's consistency, it's communication. It's all the things that every great leadership book has that you've got to apply and apply at the right times. And I think we're going through that right now, where I've definitely seen it with my leadership team saying, look, I have to hire, I have to establish processes, I have to train myself, and we've got to let them make the time, and we've got to almost force them to make the time if we can, in a nice way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You mentioned the constraints that they have, the leadership team. What did you mean by that? What kind of constraints?
There's only so much expertise. There's only so many people who have done this before. There's only so many dollars to go around, right? If we could have 5 coaches and 10 consultants and all those things that helped us get through the challenge that we know the challenge is in front of us, and we know we need to get on the other side of the challenge. But the constraints are really how, it all comes back to time, Dave, right? If I, as a leader, am able to prioritize the time to work on my leadership team, to work on my business, if I can get out of the weeds because I have, sales presentations to do or customers or client presentations to do, how do we take the constraints that are the least important off your plate, right? Delegate down or delegate out the things that are not going to be the long-term value. And it's tough for people to let go. The constraints sometimes are in people's head where they say, you know what, I need to be a part of everything. And how do I break that mold? How do I break that mindset? Becoming a true leader versus a doer.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful quote, actually, that the constraints that we sometimes and maybe most times actually invent the constraints that we have. And I loved also what you said about that when you prioritize the things that competing all your time, you solve the time constraint. Because the time constraint is actually a prioritizing a constraint, right?
Always is. No matter what, there's always more to see and more to do and more to be done than the world will ever know. And so, no matter what, even if it's just us as retirees and we're able to travel the world, there's more places that we can ever go as retirees, and you have to prioritize no matter what.
Yeah, that was fascinating. And I look at my watch. I couldn't believe that we already passed 20 minutes on this show together. It was remarkable. Yeah. Manish, any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
I think, look, I appreciate everything that you do in this podcast, Dave, putting the CEO Peak together. I think it's fascinating as a leader to learn from other leaders and never losing that curiosity, that sense of wonder of what could I do differently? What could I learn? And being decisive. One of my favorite quotes is the hallmark of a great leader is decisiveness. They take action, they make decisions. And you can always unwind from a decision. You can always change a decision, almost any decision. But the inability to take action, the inability to make a decision, the inability to learn and be curious and try new things is stifling to an organization. So I always love to leave that with people and say, you know what, take action today. Move, matter is one of our core values. Make something great happen today. And thank you for letting me share some of that with your audience, Dave.
Thank you for being with us today. I am going to shamelessly steal all of your quotes today. Like the hallmark of a leader is decisiveness. It's just so beautiful. Thank you for being on the show today, Manish.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
And thank you for watching the show. And I'm looking forward to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.